I understand this is difficult, but we need to know what you remember about the attack.
Please, you have to help me. I'm trapped in the warehouse. He's coming. Please hurry.
It was the first week of October 2003, and our big old Victorian house was buzzing. We were getting ready for one of my mom's beloved Halloween parties, the kind with fake cobwebs stretching from every corner and spooky decor covering every surface. She always went overboard this time of year, and I was her thrilled 9-year-old helper. I loved everything about Halloween: costumes, candy, decorations, all of it. Before I get to the party, it helps to picture the house. The front door was heavy wood with a mix of stained and clear glass, opening onto a wide front porch where my mom lined up pumpkins and lanterns. Inside was a broad foyer and a sweeping staircase. To the right sat the living room. If you walked straight past the stairs, a hallway led to the formal dining room. Beyond that was the kitchen, where it always smelled like something good was cooking. To the left of the foyer were 2 parlors, as my mom called them, sitting rooms crowded with antique furniture, old photographs, and odd little Victorian knickknacks. You could walk through both parlors and circle back into the dining room, making a loop around the main floor. In the days before the party, my mom and I dragged up every box of decorations from the basement. I spent hours in the front parlor unpacking plastic pumpkins, paper skeletons, rubber bats, and tangled garlands. My stepdad was in the kitchen, chopping and stirring a massive pot of chili, while my baby sister babbled in her high chair, reaching for anything remotely edible. The little TV on the counter played the local news. The forecast promised a crisp October night, perfect for a Halloween gathering. When the night finally came, we transformed the house in record time. My mom strung black and orange streamers along the staircase and draped fake cobwebs over the parlor mirrors. In the foyer, we hung a life-size plastic skeleton from the light fixture, so it greeted everyone with a permanent grin. Jack-o'-lanterns glowed on the porch, and faint recordings of eerie laughter played each time the front door opened. I was delighted with how it all looked. I imagined guests roaming from room to room, sampling candy and laughing over their costumes. Around 6 p.m., people began arriving. My older brothers handed out candy and helped direct guests inside. My mom's friends showed up dressed as witches, vampires, and a few went extra dramatic with elaborate Victorian ghost costumes that matched the house's vibe. The dining room table was jammed with Halloween snacks: deviled eggs topped with tiny olive spiders, cupcakes with candy eyeballs, bowls of candy corn, and chips dyed unnaturally orange. My stepdad's chili simmered in a huge cauldron-shaped pot, and its smell drifted all through the house. While adults chatted over hot cider, I raced around showing off the graveyard. I had set up cardboard tombstones on the floor with rubber rats scattered between them. I hoped to give people a mix of giggles and shivers. At one point, my mom dimmed the lights and put on a spooky soundtrack. We kids gathered in the front parlor to tell ghost stories. The naturally creaky floors and old walls amplified every sound, and we huddled close, wide-eyed, as someone whispered about a haunted attic. None of us would actually go up there in the dark, but we loved the thrill of pretending we might. My baby sister, too little for stories, toddled around in her tiny black cat costume, meowing at everyone, which made the grown-ups laugh. In the foyer, my oldest brother had turned a corner by the stairs into a makeshift photo booth with a polka dot sheet as a backdrop. He snapped Polaroids of us in weird poses, witch hats tilted crookedly, monster masks leering at the camera. Some of my mom's friends draped themselves dramatically over the velvet chaises in the parlor, pretending to be Victorian ghosts awake for one night only. We were halfway through the party when a gentle knock sounded at the front door, That was unusual. Normally, the doorbell chimed. The soft knock felt out of place. Curious, I weaved through the guests into the foyer. Through the glass in the front door, I saw two men standing on the porch. One looked older, with shoulder-length gray hair under a black cap. The other was younger, with a brown goatee. My first instinct, being a kid on Halloween, was to think costumes. Maybe they were late arrivals dressed as something spooky, but there was something wrong about their posture. Their clothes looked worn and dirty, not like intentionally distressed party outfits. They noticed me at the door. The older one smiled, showing stained yellow teeth. Even though it was a party and more guests were usually welcome, a cold feeling crept over me. I remembered my mom's rule: never open the door if I was alone. I called for my stepdad. He came over still wearing his skeleton apron, ladle in hand, and cracked the door open. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. The older man said they'd been invited, but my stepdad didn't recognize either of them. "Neither did I. This is a private party," my stepdad said, calm but firm. "If you don't know anyone here, you're at the wrong place." The two men glanced at each other. The younger shifted, and I noticed a beat-up van parked by the curb. An awkward silence hung there for a second. Then they muttered something about checking the address and slowly walked down the porch steps. My stepdad stayed in the doorway, watching until they got into the van and drove off. Then he closed the door and put a hand on my shoulder, telling me everything was fine. Still, the unease lingered. We went back to the party, determined not to let the interruption spoil the night. My mom had just switched the music to something upbeat, and people were dancing under our little DIY strobe lights in the living room. Costumes swirled around me: shiny vampire capes, neon wigs, toddlers in pumpkin suits waddling between legs. I lost myself in it again. Kids sneaked extra cupcakes. Adults danced to cheesy Halloween songs. I even got my older brother to let me take a Polaroid of him in a plastic Frankenstein mask. The rest of the evening stayed magical. We played bobbing for apples in the kitchen. People cheered as wet-haired contestants came up dripping, an apple clamped in their teeth. My stepdad's chili disappeared quickly. The punch bowl had to be refilled twice. Laughter and conversation filled every corner of the house. Eventually, the party thinned out. Guests hugged and said goodnight at the porch, lit by jack-o'-lanterns. My mom and stepdad stood by the door, thanking everyone. I wandered upstairs, still glowing from excitement. The house was quieter but not empty. The echoes of laughter and the faint smell of cinnamon and cider hung in the air. Despite those strange men at the door, the night had been a huge success. Later, curled up in bed, I thought about how alive our old house had felt. For a place that could sometimes seem eerie and too big, it had been full of warmth and joy that night. I realized maybe the real magic of a home isn't the architecture or its age, but how it gathers people together. Even in the middle of a spooky season, a house full of family and friends can push back almost any darkness. The memory of those two men still sent a shiver through me, but downstairs I could hear my family cleaning up and laughing. That comforting sound was the last thing I heard before drifting off. The next story from that same Victorian house happened in September 2008. I was 14, just starting 9th grade. My mom and stepdad ran local events and were usually out late closing things up. Now that a few of us kids were teenagers, we were often left home in the evenings. My job, assigned by my older brothers, was to look after my little sister, who was about 5 at the time. My stepdad was away on a business trip one night, and my mom didn't get home until around 2 a.m. after the event ended. I'd already put my sister to bed and had just begun to fall asleep myself. I didn't know it then, but my oldest brother Christian, who was 17, had been told to take out the trash before my mom got home. Of course, he hadn't. When she walked in and saw the bag still inside, she launched into one of those exhausted mom lectures he always seemed to attract. Grumbling, he grabbed both bags, hoisting one onto his shoulder and carrying the other in his hand. My mom held the back door open for him as he stepped onto the porch. and followed the sidewalk through our yard toward the trash bins. As he walked, he heard my mom call from the porch, "Christian, get back here now." Annoyed, thinking she just wasn't finished lecturing him, he yelled back, "Yeah, Mom, I'll be back in a minute. Calm down." He didn't know that what she was seeing, and he wasn't, had nothing to do with the trash. Because of the bag thrown over his shoulder, Christian couldn't see to his right. As he passed the yard, a man was standing just a few feet away from him. By the time Christian tossed the bags in the trash can and turned back, the man had moved. When Christian came around the corner and approached the porch again, he saw someone ramming their shoulder into our back door, trying to break it in. Christian ran up and shoved the guy away from the door. "What the hell are you doing, dude?" he shouted. The man stared at him for a moment, then turned, vaulted over the porch railing, and took off running into the dark. My mom yanked open the door and screamed at Christian to get inside. Barely a minute passed before they heard banging at the front of the house. They rushed through the upstairs hallway and down the stairs into the foyer to see the same man trying to force his way through the front door now. Christian jerked the door open and pushed him away again, while my mom grabbed the phone and dialed the police. The man and Christian started trading blows. A few nights earlier, Christian had sprained his wrist while sprinting away from a busted house party and didn't want another run-in with cops over underage drinking. Now that injury worked against him. He managed to block a couple of hits, but the intruder's fist eventually landed squarely on Christian's bad wrist. Pain shot through him, and he went down, grabbing his arm. The man took advantage and tried to pin him. Upstairs, my 16-year-old brother Aaron woke up. Bigger and stronger than Christian thanks to sports, he ran down to find the man on top of his brother. Aaron grabbed the intruder, hauled him off Christian, and started punching. The man stumbled, nearly falling off the porch, but Aaron yanked him back and locked him in a headlock. Around this time, I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked out the front door. All I saw were two bodies grappling on the porch in the half-light, and for a moment I couldn't tell who was who. I moved to rush outside, but my mom, still on the phone with 911, blocked my path. Christian, cradling his wrist, brushed past me holding a baseball bat he'd grabbed from inside. He stood on the porch and warned the man not to move or he'd swing. I was still piecing everything together when I glanced up the staircase and saw my 5-year-old sister, wide-eyed, peering down. I sprinted up, scooped her into my arms, and carried her into the bathroom. That bathroom had an old built-in linen cupboard filled with towels. Being a Victorian house, there were odd little hidden spaces everywhere. Under the stack of towels was a string. If you pulled it, the false bottom lifted, revealing a small, unused storage space. I yanked the towels out, lifted the hidden panel, and told my sister to climb inside. I crouched to her level and whispered, "Do not come out for anyone but me." In my head, I'd already decided, if this man got past my brothers, the ones bigger and stronger than I was, I wouldn't be able to stop him. The best thing I could do was keep her hidden and safe. I put the towels back to cover the panel, shut the cupboard, and ran downstairs again. Moments later, multiple police cars screeched up outside. Officers rushed across the lawn and onto the porch. "Which one is the intruder?" they demanded. "Which one is your brother?" Christian pointed to Aaron and the stranger, trying to explain. Aaron released the man, who then latched onto Aaron instead. The officers ordered him to let go. He didn't. They started punching, trying to break his grip. It didn't work. They threatened to tase him. Still, he clung on. Finally, they used the taser. Once, it barely seemed to faze him. They hit him again. This time, his muscles convulsed, and he let go. The officers dragged him off the porch and into custody. A few days later, we learned more. The man had been partying downtown and wound up in our neighborhood high on a dangerous mix of drugs and alcohol. That combination had made him bold, unpredictable, and strong enough to shrug off one taser shot. The thought of what might have happened if he'd gotten inside, if Christian hadn't been out taking the trash, if Aaron hadn't woken up, still chills me. And I'm grateful I thought to hide my little sister, even though, thankfully, the intruder never made it that far. Before the next story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming scary stories. Sharing them with friends and family helps us a lot. I'd always been curious about the dark web. I'd heard the stories, a hidden part of the internet where you could find anything, no rules, no limits. It sounded dangerous and thrilling. One night, that curiosity finally pushed me past common sense. I decided to explore it. Sitting in my dimly lit room, the only light coming from my monitor, I did what I'd read I had to do: download a special browser called Tor. My heart thudded with a mix of excitement and fear as I installed it. Once it loaded, I found a directory called the Hidden Wiki, a sort of guide to dark websites. The page pulled up a list of links, most with weird, nonsensical titles. Some advertised illegal services. Others claimed to sell items you couldn't find anywhere else. I knew I didn't want to get involved in anything criminal. I told myself I was just looking. I clicked a category labeled Darknet Markets and ended up on a forum. People there openly discussed drugs, weapons, fake ids, whatever you can imagine. It was disturbing but hypnotic. Then I saw a link that made my stomach drop. Red Room. I'd heard rumors about them, live streams where people were harmed or worse for viewers' entertainment. It always sounded like urban legend, something out of a horror movie. I didn't really believe it existed. Still, I clicked. A black page loaded with red text, "Enter at your own risk." My hands shook, but my curiosity was winning. I clicked enter. The screen went black, then a video player appeared with a countdown timer set for 5 minutes. It looked like it would begin streaming when the timer hit 0. I stared at it, torn. Part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut and walk away. Another part wanted to see if it was all fake. The timer reached 0. The video flickered on. At first, it was completely dark. Then a weak light switched on in the frame. It showed a room that looked like a basement, bare concrete walls, one lone chair in the middle. A person sat tied to the chair, a bag over their head. I told myself it had to be staged, but it looked real, too real. Another figure stepped into view. This person wore a black mask and gloves. They walked over and yanked the bag off the person's head. It was a woman. Her eyes were wide with terror. A gag was strapped over her mouth, muffling her screams. My stomach lurched. I couldn't do it. This was too much. I grabbed my mouse to close the browser. The screen abruptly went black. A message appeared: "You cannot leave now." My heart skipped a beat. How did they know I was trying to exit? The masked figure reappeared, now staring straight into the camera. I had the awful sensation they were staring right at me. Then they spoke in a distorted, unnatural voice. "Welcome, viewer. You wanted to see the dark web. Now you are part of it." I tried to close the program again. Nothing responded. I tried the keyboard shortcuts. No effect. I pressed and held the power button to force a shutdown. The machine stayed on. Panic surged through me. "We know who you are. We know where you are," the distorted voice continued. Tears stung my eyes. With shaking hands, I reached around to pull the power cord from the wall. It wouldn't budge. The masked figure laughed. "We have control now. You should never have come here." On screen, the woman in the chair sobbed behind her gag. The masked figure stepped closer to her, raising a knife. I turned my head away. I couldn't watch, but I could still hear her muffled, desperate cries. My phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. An unknown number had sent a text. "Watch or it gets worse." My grip tightened on the phone. I felt trapped. If I looked, I'd be complicit. If I didn't, I feared what they might do. I opened the dialer and called 911. My voice shook as I tried to explain. At first, the dispatcher sounded skeptical. Then I gave my address and begged them to send someone. I don't know if I made any sense, but they said officers were on their way. Those minutes felt like hours. The video continued playing, but the masked person still hadn't harmed the woman. It was as if they were waiting, dragging it out, feeding off my fear. Finally, I heard sirens outside. I ran to the door and flung it open, sobbing in relief. The officers looked at me, concerned and confused as I stumbled through a hurried explanation. They followed me to my room. The live stream was still up on the screen. One officer watched it for a moment, then turned to me. "We need to take your computer as evidence," he said. "We'll do everything we can to track these people down." I nodded, barely able to speak. After they left with my laptop, the room felt dangerously quiet. I sat on my bed shaking, wishing I could erase what I'd seen. I had gone looking for the forbidden and found something I will never forget. Curiosity had dragged me into a nightmare I never asked for. Even now, without that computer, I wonder if somewhere a recording still exists, or if whoever ran that stream knows exactly who watched. I was 7 in 1997, the year my parents' divorce became official. They'd been having problems for a while. My dad stayed in our old house. My mom moved us, me, my 2 older sisters, our big family dog, into a vacant property my grandparents owned. They'd recently relocated and left the place empty, so it seemed like a practical solution. We lived there until around 2002. It should have been a fresh start. Instead, the house quickly earned a reputation among us kids as the place with the basement. The layout was simple, 3 levels. The ground floor with the living areas, bedrooms upstairs, and a large basement beneath it all. A single staircase twisted between all 3 floors, and the steps creaked no matter how carefully you tried to walk. You could hear anyone moving from floor to floor. Late at night, long after we were supposed to be asleep, we'd hear footsteps start in the basement. Slow, deliberate, not like the house settling. They would climb to the ground floor, pause, then continue up to the 2nd story. They weren't random, they were steady, measured. Sometimes they stopped outside my oldest sister's door, sometimes outside my middle sister's or mine. Then they would fade away. We'd bury our faces under blankets, hearts racing. In the mornings, we'd huddle in the kitchen before school and quietly compare what we'd heard. You heard them too. They stopped right at my door. Same time as last night. It was an open secret between us, but we never really discussed it with our mom. Any mention of the basement made her tense up. She never came out and said it scared her, but she didn't have to. We could see it. Instead, we all tried to pretend it was just the house or old pipes, even though we knew better. Down in that basement, strange things stacked up. The lights would flicker or shut off entirely, even though the wiring checked out. Small objects would be moved or rearranged when no one had been down there. Every so often we'd hear a scrape or a clatter with no obvious cause. There was rarely a breeze, yet things toppled over. And our dog, who followed us everywhere, absolutely refused to go down those stairs. She'd plant herself at the top, whining, but never set a paw on the first step. One evening, we were playing with a set of walkie-talkies we'd gotten as a gift, seeing if we could pick up police or trucker channels. Instead, a different voice came through. It sounded close. Too close, like the speaker was in the next room. The voice addressed my oldest sister by name. Then it threatened her. We tried asking questions. It ignored them. It just kept repeating variations of the same ominous message, that it knew who she was and what it was going to do. We dropped the walkie-talkies and shut them off. Within seconds, our dog barreled into the room, barking at nothing we could see, hackles raised. She stared into empty air, growling. It was the only time we'd ever seen her that protective when no visible person was there. Another afternoon, when my sisters and the dog were out, my mom and I were the only ones home. She was doing chores on the ground floor. I was upstairs in my room. Suddenly, I heard heavy, angry-sounding footsteps in the basement. They thundered up the stairs too fast and too forceful to be my mom. They climbed straight to the 2nd floor. Then they reached my doorway. The door slammed shut so hard the walls shook. The knob jammed. My door didn't even have a lock, but it wouldn't budge. I screamed for my mom. She ran upstairs and tried the handle. It wouldn't turn. She left to grab something to force it open, leaving me trapped and sobbing on the other side. A few moments later, the knob clicked. The door swung open on its own. There was no one there. I ran straight into her arms. She didn't have an explanation, just a shaken look that told me she was as unnerved as I was. Then there was the storm. One night during a thunderstorm, my sisters and the dog were out again, leaving just me and my mom at home. Normally thunder didn't bother me, but this time every crack of lightning made the house feel like it was holding its breath. From the basement came chaos, glass shattering, furniture scraping, repeated banging like someone was hurling objects against the walls. We sat frozen in the living room, my mom's arms wrapped tightly around me as we listened to the front door blow open and slam shut over and over. The pattern felt intentional, not random gusts of wind. In the morning, the basement was a mess, broken glass everywhere, boxes overturned, things displaced with no logical explanation. We learned to get used to these episodes. They seemed worse on days when our dog wasn't home, like her presence kept something at bay. The activity also seemed to focus on my oldest sister more often than not, though I never fully understood why. Eventually, in the early 2000s, we moved and my grandparents sold the house. The strange experiences stayed behind with it. We never really talked about it much after that, but every now and then when someone mentions that place, we all get the same distant look. We remember the stairs, the basement, and the footsteps that climbed at night. My name is Harry, and this happened years ago in my hometown in Germany. Back then, nothing in my life was going right. I'd lost my job, my relationship had fallen apart, and everything felt heavy and empty. I was doing my best to hold it together, but there was no peace in me. My family owns a little place out in the woods, a mix between a small house and a cabin. We call the surrounding forest the Schwarzwald. When I was a boy, we would spend weekends there. Some of my best childhood memories live in that cabin. I figured going back there might help me reset. I told my parents I'd spend the weekend there, maybe a few extra days. I packed a bag, took the keys, and drove out. The drive wasn't long. The real effort is the walk from the parking area to the cabin. As I hiked in, memories came flooding back. Nothing looked like it had changed. The deeper I went, the denser the forest grew. After about an hour, I saw it. The cabin was bigger than most people expect. 2 bedrooms, a large living room, a bathroom with a shower, a toilet, and a huge balcony looking straight out over a wall of trees. I went directly to the room I'd used as a kid and dropped my bag. I put the snacks I'd brought into the fridge, kicked off my shoes, and stretched out on the sofa. When I opened my eyes again, it was fully dark outside. I pulled myself up, made something simple to eat, brewed some tea, and stepped out onto the balcony with my mug. I left the balcony door cracked open at an angle. From where I sat, I could see into the living room through the glass without standing right in front of the door. At some point, I thought I saw something, a shape just inside the living room. I stood up so fast I knocked the chair back, the noise echoing off the balcony. I rushed inside. Nothing, just silence and my own quick breaths. I told myself I was overtired. After a while, I decided to call it a night. I changed, brushed my teeth, and headed for the bedroom. On the way, I noticed my shoes. I had left them neatly side by the door. Now they were scattered as if someone had kicked them out of the way. I stared at them, then forced myself to shrug it off. But even though I was exhausted, sleep wouldn't come. Sometime in the middle of the night, I heard it. Noises. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just animals outside. Branches, leaves, something normal. Then I realized the sounds were coming from inside the cabin. Impossible, I thought. Who could be here? I was alone in the middle of the woods. The doorknob rattled. Every muscle inside me went stiff. The bedroom door creaked open. Then silence. I rolled onto my side so my face was to the wall, eyes squeezed shut, breathing shallow. I didn't know what else to do. I had no weapon, no plan. Footsteps started. Slow, heavy, like boots on the floor. They came closer and closer. Then the mattress dipped behind me. Whoever it was had sat down on the edge of the bed. I stayed as still as I could, praying they thought I was asleep. Every second felt like an hour. Then he spoke. "What's up, boy? Are you scared?" His voice was low, almost casual. "I know you saw me from the balcony, and I know you're not sleeping, but today is your lucky day. Even though I didn't find anything worth taking, I'm not going to hurt you." He paused. "The next time, just remember to lock the door. Some bad things could have happened to you tonight." The mattress lifted. I heard footsteps again, receding out of the room and through the cabin. I lay there until the first hint of daylight came through the curtains. Then I got up, grabbed my things, and left. I didn't even make breakfast. I just walked back to the car and drove away. My family has never gone back to that cabin since. I was a new nurse in an old hospital, and I'd only been there a couple of months when this happened. The place always put me on edge. The floors creaked, the lighting was dim in some of the older wings, and it carried that heavy, lingering smell of disinfectant and age. Still, I was determined to prove myself, no matter how eerie the environment felt. One night, I was assigned to care for Mr. Thompson, an elderly man admitted with pneumonia. When I entered his room, he wasn't looking at me. He was staring fixedly at the far corner. "Mr. Thompson, is everything all right?" I asked, trying to sound calm. His eyes were wide with fear. "There's a girl in the corner," he whispered. "She's been there for hours just watching me." I glanced over. The corner held nothing but shadow and a bit of peeling paint. "There's no one there," I said gently. "It might just be a trick of the light." He shook his head hard. "No, she's real. She's been haunting me since I got here." I did what I could to soothe him, but his fear was raw and it lingered. All night he kept darting nervous looks toward that corner, muttering about the girl. As the hours passed, an uneasy feeling crept in. I couldn't shake the sense that the room wasn't empty. More than once I thought I saw something flicker in my peripheral vision, only to find nothing when I turned. Later that night, I went back to check on him. His bed was empty. My chest tightened. I checked the bathroom, then under the bed, even though it was ridiculous. Nothing. Panic rising, I stepped back into the room, and a cold breeze swept across my skin, standing every hair on end. I turned toward the corner. She was there. A pale girl, translucent, her eyes hollow and dark. Her face was expressionless, but the intensity of her gaze sent shivers down my spine. Instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I stood rooted in place, caught between terror and the sense that this was still somehow my responsibility. Mr. Thompson was gone, but I was still his nurse. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper. The ghost tilted her head as if the question puzzled her. When she spoke, her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from deep underground. "I am trapped here," she said. "Cursed to wander these halls for eternity, but you can help me." My blood turned cold. "How?" I asked. She extended one faint, shimmering hand toward me. "Find the locket," she said. "It holds the key to my freedom. Find it and set me free." I hesitated. It could have been some hallucination brought on by exhaustion or stress, but the sorrow in her eyes felt real, desperate. "Where is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She pointed toward the hospital's abandoned wing, an area people whispered about, calling it haunted, where old, unused rooms sat locked and forgotten. Then she vanished. The room was empty again, the air suddenly still. Despite every instinct telling me to stay in the lit, occupied parts of the hospital, I made my way toward the old wing. The air grew cooler, the smell of dust and mildew replacing the usual antiseptic. My footsteps echoed, and shadows flickered in the corners of my vision. I climbed narrow stairs up to the attic. Inside, the room was choked with cobwebs and stacks of old boxes, yellowed patient files, outdated medical equipment, forgotten things crowding the space. I started searching. I opened boxes and sifted through piles of random items, feeling more foolish and unnerved with each passing minute. Then, half buried under a stack of cracked photo frames, I saw it. A small, tarnished locket. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, cold against my skin. A deep sense of foreboding washed over me. I knew that opening it meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross, but I'd promised. I took a steadying breath and snapped it open. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a young girl, smiling, full of light and life. A piercing scream ripped through the attic. I stumbled back, heart in my throat. When I looked up, she was there, the same ghostly girl from Mr. Thompson's room. Her form flickered between solid and transparent. "You've done it," she said, her voice just barely audible over the echo of her scream. "You've set me free." A blinding light exploded around her, flooding the attic in a warm, almost holy glow. For a moment she was perfectly clear, a girl frozen between this world and another. Then, like smoke caught in a breeze, she dissolved. Silence crashed down around me. I stood alone in that dusty attic, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Fear still hummed in my veins, but beneath it was a strange calm. I had helped a lost soul find release. And somewhere in that act, I discovered that I wasn't as fragile as I'd thought. I could face the things I was most afraid of and still stand my ground. I left the attic, the locket empty and cold in my hand, knowing the hospital's halls would never feel quite the same, but no longer haunted in the same way. I'm Tim, and I live alone in a small ranch-style house on the outskirts of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Because of my job, I keep a night shift schedule. I'm usually wide awake while the rest of the neighborhood has gone dark. Most nights I like the solitude. It fits me. Then something happened earlier this year that made me rethink how comfortable I was with the quiet. It was Friday, January 5th, 2024, though weekends don't mean much when you work nights. Around 2:30 in the morning, I noticed one of the basement lights had been flickering for a couple days. I'm pretty handy, so I figured I'd take care of it before the bulb died completely. I pulled on a sweatshirt, slipped into my house shoes, grabbed a new bulb, and headed down the creaky basement stairs. My basement is more storage than anything else. Old holiday decorations, boxes of childhood stuff, my dad's tools, all piled in half-organized stacks. The flickering fixture was near the far corner over my dad's old woodworking bench, beneath a dusty little window. I unscrewed the failing bulb and started screwing in the new one. "Tim?" It was an older man's voice, soft but clear, coming from somewhere behind me. My heart slammed into my ribs. For a second I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but I wasn't tired. I'm used to being alert at this hour. I turned around, scanning the shadows. Nothing, just boxes, shelves, and the low hum of the furnace. I stood there, listening hard. Silence. I told myself I was being jumpy and turned back to the light. "Tim, over here." This time the voice sounded more insistent. A cold wave rolled through me. I spun again, raising my phone to use its flashlight, shining it into the corners of the room behind the stacks along the far wall. No one. I ran through possibilities. Could someone have broken in? A homeless person, a neighbor. It didn't add up. Everything was locked. The windows were intact. There was nowhere for someone to hide that I hadn't already looked. I took a few cautious steps forward, listening for the slightest movement. Nothing. No more voice. No scuff of shoe or rustle of clothing. After a couple of minutes, my pulse slowed a bit. I decided I was either hearing things or my brain was playing tricks on me with the house's sounds. I finished changing the bulb and went back upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. The rest of the night, I tried to distract myself with TV, but every quiet moment my mind replayed that voice. It was too clear to dismiss easily. Over the next few days, I kept telling myself it was just exhaustion. People mishear things all the time, right? But I couldn't quite convince myself. About a week later, I decided to test my nerves. At exactly 2:30 in the morning, I went back down. This time I left every light on upstairs, just in case. I stood in the middle of the basement, phone in hand, and waited. Nothing. Feeling stupid, I said, "Is anyone here?" out loud. Only the hum of the furnace answered. I stayed for about 15 minutes listening. No footsteps, no voice, no cold chill creeping up my back. Eventually, I climbed back up, flipped off the light, and closed the door. That should have settled it. Instead, it made me more uneasy. The first time, it had felt unmistakably real. Why only once? Why never again? It left me with the eerie sense that whoever, or whatever, had called my name needed to catch me off guard. I tried to get back to normal. Work, eat, sleep, my usual cycle. But every time I walked past the basement door, I found myself slowing down, half expecting to hear that same voice whisper my name again from the darkness. Sometimes I'd just stand there for a few seconds, debating whether to open the door and look, or keep walking and pretend I wasn't thinking about it. I never did fling it open. Months have passed, the voice hasn't come back. I've told exactly one friend, and he just shrugged and said, "Your mind was playing tricks on you, man." Maybe he's right. Then again, the older I get, the more I suspect that not everything we experience can be neatly filed away under stress or imagination. Some things stay with you because, deep down, you know they were real, even if you can't explain them.